Okay, so today, folks, we have the pleasure of speaking to and hopefully learning from Dr. Marshall-Woods. She is a licensed clinical psychologist and the mind behind Psych-Minded Media. So, what is Psych-Minded Media exactly? I mean, it sounds very interesting. So I'd like to get a little bit more background about that.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me, first of all. Psych-Minded Media is a company that works with individuals to do multiple different things. So we work with screenwriters and directors to help them think about their character development when they are feeling like their characters are lacking in depth in some ways, and they want to improve their defenses or their interpersonal abilities or their way of responding to people in a feelings way or emotional way. We talk about what they have already and attempt to grow that character to be more accurate. Um, it also works on theme development when individuals, let's say, are experiencing mourning or bereavement. A screenwriter may say, what would that look like? And we come in and talk to them about how individuals, based upon the relationship they had with the person who may have died, how they may respond based upon the theories that we have psychologically. Most often, we work with individuals to be able to enhance the mental health aspects of their writing. So, if someone says, I want to write about someone who has antisocial personality disorder, what would that character look like? We talk about the criteria, what sort of affective responses a person may provide, how they may interact with other individuals. In order to really accurately present what mental health looks like on screen, because so many times we see mental health portrayed in ways that are unrealistic and very dramatized, which makes for great TV, but it also makes for a lot of stigma, and it makes for a lot of inaccuracies as to what does mental health issues really look like. So when someone is actually suffering from a mental health disorder, people really struggle to say, I know what I'm seeing and this person needs help.
That is fascinating. I did not know that that was even a service.
I
Provide.
was I was I was gonna ask you. You said it was a company, so I'm assuming it's for profit. Do you consult with a lot of television shows, or do you have writers that are coming to you that are like, I need help crafting this character? Is it both or all the above?
It's both. Yes, it is a company. It is for profit. I do consultation. I work with a lot of writers at the onset of their work or when they're already in their final draft about to present to producers and different studios. And or I also do set accuracy work, which is happens after everything is pretty finalized and people are actually on set. People may want to develop a character and they'll say, what sort of environment should this person be in? Like, we have this person who has OCD. What should their apartment look like? And I come in and I help decorate what it should look like.
Mm.
Yeah. I mean, that it seems like a very, and I mean, maybe this is my ignorance, but a unique career path within your profession. How did you decide that this was uh, your thing? Like, because I know plenty of people who majored in psychology, they work in psychology, but like I'm shocked. Like, I think this is the coolest thing ever. Seriously, I'm like, how do you that? I mean, to be able to take your profession and then combine it with something so creative, um, that
Yeah.
that's something else. So, if someone were interested in doing something like this with their degree, what would you suggest?
Oh, wow. Um, Honestly, it's following what you're good at and what you love. I mean, for me, I was in performing arts well before I became a psychologist, and I worked in media before I became a psychologist. And I had no desire to continue those career paths, knowing how difficult it is to become established. And I knew I wanted to be a psychologist. So I was really focused and honed in on that. But being a psychologist, you have an opportunity many times to do exactly what we're doing tonight, coming on a media platform where someone wants you to be an expert, or being on television for whatever reasons to talk about mental health. And soon enough, I was doing a lot of work like that, which I did not expect to happen in my career. People would find me and say, can you come on this television show to talk about this aspect of mental health? And I realized that there's really a lot of questions about the different ranges of mental health issues, whether it's just, and I shouldn't say just, but let's say a minor version of depression, like what does that look like, versus someone who has a more severe mental health issue that suffers from chronic psychosis. People are interested in knowing about mental health, and people don't necessarily talk about it. And specifically, people don't necessarily talk about the psychological theory behind it. Um, Therefore, there's a lot of misconceptions about mental health. And so I found a lot of my career, I would say 30% of my career, was going on to television shows, helping people think about mental health. Now I currently host a television show myself for Washington, D.C. That's exactly what I'm doing, is bringing mental health to the community. But for me, that wasn't enough in being creative. And I realized my creative aspect of who I am as a person was not always gratified. So I figured I needed to figure out how to marry really what I love. How do I get mental health out to the public in a way that's accurate? And how can I help people who have large platforms do that? And the people who have the largest platforms informing the public are people in film. People watch media, and they are in control of what we see, what we digest, what we understand about mental health. Those were the people I wanted to talk to and work with.
I was perusing your site. I saw, I don't know, you or someone did a write-up on a short film called Fatherless.
I did.
Yeah. My buddy Chad was the star of that movie.
Yes, Chad Smith. Yes, he's fantastic.
Have you seen Rumination, his previous film before? Yeah.
Actually, I have. That's how I met Chad, actually.
Oh, nice. Okay, because there's a lot of mental. Okay, great. That makes perfect sense. All right. Yeah, Chad is great. Yeah. I'm sorry. I just.
Very talented.
Jump in if you want to ask a question. I don't want to dominate the conversation. Before we move on to talk about the article and the Britney Spears documentary that we're going to get into, does anybody have any questions?
I do, but it's probably going to be open-ended. And Doc, please just tell me, like, that's a ridiculous question. Like, I can only give you but so much.
Right. Like,
it seems like mental health is like a buzzword. Now we all kind of sort of have a vague idea, or some obviously more detailed than others. As a professional, as a clinician, as a specialist, how would you define mental health?
Wow. That is a big question.
I was thinking about it now.
I'm going to humbly say that I probably cannot do that well with grace. However, I will take a stab at it. Mental health is the aspect of your psyche and caring for it. That's really it. I mean, the similar way that we think about physical health is that our physique, our body, is something that we need to take care of and to nurture in order for it to work on our behalf and serve us well. We also need to do that for our internal psyche. Many times people, I think, neglect that idea. I think just like we have to go get physical health, or we're recommended to get physical health consultations with a doctor every year to check in on our physical health, I feel like we should have to do that with our mental health as well. Some countries actually have adopted that idea, that they offer that service. Even if you don't continue to receive mental health services, therapeutic services, psychiatric services, I think it's important for people to touch base with themselves, But I think in the grind of the everyday life, especially in America, it's very difficult to do that because there are a lot of other stressors to care for. But mental health is something that equally goes quite neglected for people. But it is a part of who you are. Your psyche is not going anywhere, right? You can move from Texas, as you were mentioning earlier, to Baltimore, and your psyche is going to follow you. We have to decide to care for it.
That makes sense.
It does.
So you mentioned when we corresponded via email that one thing you're passionate about is mental health awareness in the African American community, specifically. What would you say that you've noticed is maybe the biggest challenge when it comes to mental health awareness in the African American community?
I'm limited to one, correct?
Oh, well, no. However you want to, this is how you want to answer. Yeah, it can be a 1A, 1B, 1C. Like.
Okay, I'll do 1A and 1B. 1A is a lack of awareness, right? What I was mentioning earlier before, someone can be depressed and people don't necessarily recognize that the other person is depressed, that they may need help. And I would say the caveat of 1B is that when someone does mention that, let's say, depression is present, that it is minimized. They're depressed because, and yeah, I mean, the reasons why that follows are valid. They're depressed because of oppression. They're depressed because of systemic racism. They're depressed because of lack of employment. They're depressed because of poor interpersonal relationships. They're depressed because of food insecurity. All of those reasons are valid. But the fact of the matter is, this person is still depressed and they need help for the depression. And as a matter of fact, in order to get some of those other pressures to be more manageable, if one deals and begin to relate to their mental health, they're actually in a better position to be able to face systemic racism, oppression, food insecurities, and all of those things. It's almost as if the idea is, if these things went away, this person wouldn't be depressed. Possibly, but these things do exist, and this person doesn't have to be depressed.
I love that. I love that. So when you mentioned that a person could be depressed or have depression and other people may not be aware of it, what are some signs that may be overlooked? Because I think there might be some obvious things like being lethargic or crying spells, you know, things that anyone could easily identify. But what are some of the more subtle things that a person can look out for if they're concerned about someone?
Sure. Social isolation, wanting to step away from engaging with other individuals, pessimism, feeling in what we would consider in the criteria is hopelessness, that things will not get better despite any possibilities that they could. An individual who may be actually more sleepy when you said lethargic, but actually want to sleep more to escape their life. An individual whose appetite changes, whether they begin to eat more or less. Someone who is unable to perform tasks that they were once engaged in, that they actually enjoyed, that they're now stepping away from participating in those activities. Weight gain and weight loss, either one is also a sign of depression. When it starts to get pretty severe, you're going to see an individual who struggles with food, someone who's not necessarily now taking care of their physical self, and unable to have motivation to brush their hair or brush their teeth or take a shower daily. Someone who actually says that they feel sad most days out of the month. Now, I want to highlight that because not all individuals articulate sadness. They may articulate that they feel irritable or angry or resentful. And those are pretty much most of the symptoms of depression. And I want to highlight, people can feel these ways and a lot of the time, but individuals who are depressed, who would warrant that diagnosis, it has to impact their interpersonal relationships, their ability to work or attend school. It has to have changed how they can function in their life.
Sense. So let's just, I'm trying to like paint a picture in my head. So we'll say we have someone that we care about in our lives. They are exhibiting some of those symptoms, but that person may be resistant to getting the help that you feel like they might need. How would a person deal with that resistance, and how could someone maybe gently encourage someone to go to get professional help from a therapist? Because I think we've all, not all of us, but I'm sure plenty of people have been in situations where we know someone who could benefit from therapy, but you bring it up and it's like, you think I need therapy? And it's like, there's nothing wrong with therapy, but like, how would you suggest someone handle that?
Sure. If they're a child, send them to therapy. You have until they're 18 to be the person to make that decision on their behalf. And I would highly recommend that, actually not waiting for them to have persistent chronic years of depression, which is actually problematic for an individual to have. So if they're under 18, send them to therapy. They may resist while they're in therapy. They may never talk to the therapist. They may sit with their arms crossed in therapy, but therapists know how to deal with that and they'll figure it out. If it's an adult and you're getting resistance and they are not attempting to move forward, is maybe just sharing with them that you are concerned. These are the attributes and symptoms that you're seeing, which causes you concern. Do they feel concerned? Do they have any feelings that things have changed for them? In what ways have that happened for them? So then they can actually identify that things have changed in their lives, but it needs to come from them. Ultimately, if a person's resistant and they don't want to attend therapy, they won't. And you can't, unfortunately, pressure someone to see a therapist or a therapist to see them. As an adult, they have to be the person who calls the therapist, makes the appointment with the therapist, because they have to be a consenting individual to the treatment. But one of the things you can articulate is that regardless to the depths in which their depression may go, is that you're there for them. And if they need someone to talk to, that you can be that person. And if you feel like you can't be, is to help them identify people who can be, because you may not have the emotional space to be able to take that on, to be honest. And so who can we identify as your social network that can support you? And if we get to a place where there's an emergency, where you feel like you want to harm yourself or others, these are the steps in which you will be taking, and making that very clear to the person that those steps would be calling 911, having the hospital on call, having the EMS there, and the police will be there too. And this is what this will look like for you. So then it's very clear what you are seeing and what, if they need this sort of help, what you will do, so they don't then feel betrayed by you later.
Are you in practice still?
Oh yes, I have a private practice and I'm the director of psychology at a mental health hospital in DC.
Okay, so I don't know if it's professionally ethical or if you can even look at it from this lens, but what are the differences, I guess piggybacking on the last question, what are the differences that you see in approaching Black people and mental health versus other races versus, you know, what are the differences? What are some of the challenges? You said you want to limit yourself to just one, but it sounded like you had many things to say. So I guess that's what piqued my curiosity. What else have you seen just as a professional? some of the issues that we have within our own community when it comes to mental health and addressing it?
Yeah, honestly, I think depending on the person's culture, it impacts significantly how invested they are or receptive they are to even receiving treatment and how they even express their symptoms. We see that more in the Latino community, for an example, individuals more express their mental health concerns as physical concerns. And so we ask more about physical headaches. Do they have a lot of stomach issues and things like that? And many times they'll say yes, but if I asked about anxiety or depression, they may say no. But a doctor has cleared them and says, you know, we are not the doctors for you, the psychologists are. Whereas in the African American community, many times, again, the problems are minimized and or externalized. It's more externalized to cultural issues that we as a people experience that, of course, would create depressive symptoms or anxiety or what we would call culturally appropriate paranoia. And all of those things are taken into account when we are thinking about diagnosing and treating someone. That if someone has a history of trauma, for an example, and they live in an environment that is has a lot of violence in it, and this person says they fear walking down the street, we're not going to diagnose them with a formal thought disorder. Of course, they should be paranoid and hypervigilant even. That makes sense for the environment they're in. But many times, those environmental factors and external factors are used as ways to minimize the internal symptoms someone has, unfortunately.
So a lot of it's environment, a lot of it is the differences in environment, the differences in culture kind of sort of breed the different reactions, different views we have towards checking on our internal psyche, the mental health definition that part of the mental health definition that you provided. Is there anything that we can cognitively do as conscious Black people with a media platform that are interested and concerned? Is there something we can do every week, every day, so I don't know how vigilant we should be. I know it's important, but I don't know if we can do anything all the time. What would you recommend that you have us do?
Yeah, ask yourself, how are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
How am I feeling? And connecting with that feeling. If you find yourself answering, I feel murderously rageful every day, that would be concerning, right? So can you see a pattern in how you're feeling? That, yes, some days you're going to be happy. And it's actually not appropriate to be happy every day. So if you're happy every day too, that you're like, wait a minute, what's going on with your life where you feel happy every day? Nothing from outside has made you feel any different. So can you see what we would call a range of affect? Meaning that maybe today and maybe tomorrow you say, today were neutral days. Today was a really good day. I felt really happy. Tomorrow you'll say, you know, something happened and I really have felt sad throughout the day. I've had a feeling of just heaviness. Can you see a range of affect through your patterns of how, when you check in with yourself? I think that's really important for people to be able to have some way to be able to see what is their life like and be able to then reflect on it. This past month, I have been feeling X, and I actually haven't liked how I felt. Is there something now I should be doing differently, or were things in my life that were a catalyst to those feelings that then I need to work on shifting? Now someone is cognitively and consciously thoughtful of what is going on with their psyche, and they are now willing to change or shift or modify what's happening in their external world for their internal world to feel better. Or they can say, okay, I know these things won't change, but what do I need to do for me so then I can feel better? Now we're thinking more self-care.
There's just first an initial acceptance of your feelings. And if, I guess, circumstances can't change, there's something that you can put into practice to, I don't know if that's the right word, to trick yourself into feeling better, but to, yeah, I guess force yourself into some type of better mood, I guess.
Well, hopefully it wouldn't feel forced. It would feel authentic. Whatever you're identifying should be something you genuinely like. I mean, for an example, like if you're having a bad day or if you're not feeling creative, what do you usually go to that makes you feel more inspired? Whatever you choose should be authentic to who you feel like you are, that's going to help you feel better. And so it's not necessarily a trick, it's actually just identifying and honoring who you are and gratifying that aspect of who you are.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is when you're in the midst of it, it's like you already have that. Like it's something that I liked when I was feeling better, but I'm not gonna like it now because I'm depressed. But
that
yeah,
is right. Yeah. And there you have it. And that's when you know the person needs help. Mm-hmm. I used to like it when I wasn't depressed, and now I don't. Now there's no options for this person. When someone feels like there's no options, this person now is at risk for suicidal ideations and suicide attempts and feelings of hopelessness. This person needs help.
Interesting. Wow, this is very,
insightful. I love it.
it's real. It's definitely why we wanted to do it.
Yes.
So, side note, so you worked with Chad on Rumination with Danny about the mental, what the characters were supposed to?
So I met Chad after the film was created.
Okay.
And I actually wrote a blog on his film as well. And then he actually had a film screening and had a panel speaking about mental health and other concerns. And then I spoke about mental health based upon his character and why rumination, that word in particular, was used and what that meant for his character and who he is as an actor as well.
Great. Thank you.
For anyone who may not know, how do you define rumination?
Me or like
yeah. Either you or like whatever the professional definition of the word is, because I, in my mind, have an idea of what rumination might be, but for those who may not really even, like I think we all ruminate, but we may not know that we're doing it. So, I mean, maybe to start out, how you would define it, and then perhaps signs that this is something that you're doing.
Sure. My understanding of the definition of rumination is that it is when you have a thought and or feeling, and it is a thought and or feeling that you continue to experience over and over again, despite attempts to discontinue experiencing it, but you cannot. What happens, you said, what are some signs that you're ruminating? Is when you find yourself thinking about the same thing over and over and over again. Even if you've tried to distract yourself, like you turn on some music or you begin to read an article, you'll realize your thoughts go right back to that original thought. For most people, rumination doesn't necessarily mean it's a negative thing. For some people, if they're ruminating immediately after something's happened, they're attempting to process what's happened to them. What would be more helpful is just giving yourself the time and space just to process it, so then it doesn't interfere with your other activities if you can. But what happens is that it becomes problematic when it's over the course of weeks or months. And then again, it starts to impact your functioning. Like, I can't stop thinking about this, so I can't get out of bed, or I can't go to work. I have to call off. I can't do my work because I'm so distracted by these thoughts or how I'm feeling.
So before we move on, does anyone have any other questions? No, we're good? Okay. So the next thing that I would like to talk about is a documentary that was recently released about pop star Britney Spears. It was done by the New York Times. It's, I guess, an unofficial documentary because Britney didn't participate. There are people who are a part of her life who did participate. I'm just going to give a quick summary of it. I pulled a little bit from this article. that was printed on Entertainment Tonight online. This is just for anyone who hasn't seen it. So it's called Framing Britney, or Framing Britney Spears, and it wow, they're using some flowery language. Unravels a heartbreaking pop mystery. Okay, so the pop star's rise and fall has been told repeatedly. A new documentary looks to reframe the narrative. Of the many myths that exist about Britney Spears, the most insidious is that she has no agency or artistry of her own. She's a beautiful pop star puppet, the most visible cog of an elaborate machine. Throughout her career, she's been haunted by that lie born out of misogyny and buoyed by the willful misinterpretation of her work, wherein she has always knowingly danced the line between subject and object, simultaneously in complete control and totally vulnerable to outside influence. The tension is part of what makes her such a compelling artist and a uniquely perfect target. The documentary is titled Framing Britney Spears, and indeed, framed she always has been, as a star, as a slut, as a psychopath, through lenses adoring or derisive or hateful. But apart from her music, she's never claimed the narrative in a substantial way herself. There was no platform that enabled her to. One quietly devastating moment in the film comes after her failed romance with Justin Timberlake, who then effortlessly tapped into Americans' latent sexism to swiftly cast her as the villain, himself the victim of their breakup, most famously in the Crimea River video, featuring an unmistakable Spears lookalike as a traitorous girlfriend. When it's time for people to come for a woman, says Wesley Morris, one of the New York Times critics providing analysis in the documentary, there's a whole apparatus ready to do it. So, thoughts? From anyone who's seen it or just some of those topics. I mean, I think there's a lot that's gone on with Britney in her life in terms of being a child star, being pushed into the spotlight, probably wanting to control her own narrative, but then also being influenced by all the people in her life, being someone who has had mental health struggles and issues, and people, I think, like you mentioned, Dr. Marshall-Woods, minimizing those mental health issues that she might have been struggling with. So I'm just interested in, Dr. Marshall-Woods, your professional perspective, but anyone else who wants to jump in and talk about the documentary, you are free to do so as well.
I just need a point of clarity. It seems like her parents had conservatorship over her estate, which they just lost. How did they get that in the first place?
Her father was over the conservatorship. And you're saying they lost the conservatorship? Is this like a...
That happened today. Yeah.
Oh, well, that's good. Good.
Yeah, that happened today. But how did they get it in the first place?
And was it at the particular point when she shaved her head? Like, was there an impetus? Or?
Yeah, I remember the pop culture stuff. I actually never took the time to go into the background of
things got
the breakdown.
murky. It was like after the breakup with Justin Timberlake and then the marriage to Kevin Federline.
Oh.
And then her, I think they had 2 children. And so she's going through postpartum depression and she's having custody struggles. And paparazzi is like constantly surrounding her. Like she can't go anywhere without cameras being right here and lights everywhere. So I think in the midst of all that, that's how, I don't know, maybe her father just stepped in and said that she is not mentally capable of making decisions for herself. And
a court agreed with him.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sorry.
I read something where she requested it, but she asked for it not to be her father, and then they appointed her father.
Right, and that's what she's wanted. Even with this conservatorship that Kwasi said that today it's no longer in place. Her argument wasn't that she didn't want a conservatorship. She just never wanted her father to be the person who was responsible for things. Because throughout the documentary, a lot of people would make comments about how he just seemed like he was in it for the money. He's a very controlling person. And there were even snippets where she would interact with her father and you could see it. It's like, this man isn't even trying to hide it. He knows MTV is right here and he's trying to tell her what to do, and it's something so small. Yeah.
So I guess what the I'm just looking at the article right now where it says the judge rules against Britney Spears' father in conservatorship dispute. Is this documentary, it tracks just her rise and fall, or does it specifically focus on like the mental health aspect?
It's both. I don't think they don't really, they talk about the mental health aspect, but it's more so about her rise and fall and then her battle with her father and this conservatorship. And how she is, was not willing to perform or do anything until her father was out of the picture, because it went from her having a fortune of maybe $250 million to now it's dwindled down to $60 million. It's like, where's all the money going? She's spending it on him. She's spending it probably on her lawyers and then paying for his lawyers to go against her.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy. So
I'm sorry.
Oh no, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, just a point of clarity. Her dad is still conservator. He's just not the sole one. They have Bessemer Trust. They appointed a third party. So it's Jamie Spears and Bessemer Trust. And his beef was he doesn't want like a third party. And the judge is like, yeah.
Okay.
That's what it is.
That would be beneficial. If there's a financial advisor involved, then maybe the financial advisor has to give all of his decisions. This would definitely be more helpful for Britney. So Dr. Marshall-Woods, are you familiar with these like conservatorship proceedings? Can you tell us how a person can just lose their autonomy because a person has decided that they're not equipped to handle certain things? And how is it that a person can't step up and say, I no longer need someone to take care of my affairs. I can handle it myself. It just seems like it's a contract that should be effortless to get out of, but it's not. It's very binding. It's almost impossible to get out of a conservatorship.
Like you got to put on a show, like look at me, I'm normal again, or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't think it's impossible for everyone. I'm not sure why for Britney Spears it may have become more impossible, but I don't believe it's impossible for everyone. People can certainly lose their autonomy when they are not in a place to be able to make decisions that serve them well. And there's a history of making poor decisions that have large consequences for them. Many times that does happen if an individual ends up going to, let's say, a mental health hospital involuntarily, and they have other responsibilities that they have to manage outside of the hospital while they're receiving care. In order to make those responsibilities continue to progress, you need someone that can make sound decisions on their behalf while they're institutionalized. So that happens, and they go to court, and usually someone like we've been talking about is appointed to be able to assist them. And that can be amicable or not. Not everyone wants that. Not everyone wants the person who's selected. Sometimes people who are selected are actually people that the actual individual patient is unaware of who they are. It's someone that's a stranger to them, that is their job, that they are conservative over many other individuals too. But a person is able to regain that autonomy over time. Once they have received specific treatment, usually their psychiatrist provides information regarding their treatment and their level of emotional stability. Sometimes individuals are asked to receive a psychological evaluation in order to determine the person's ability to think through problems, execute solutions, which is what we test for, that can support their case or not. And then the judge makes a ruling. It generally does not look like what I have been seeing on the news about Britney Spears and how long this is lasting. But I do think it is telling is that she's not asking to not have it. She's asking for someone else to share or have it on her behalf, which may speak to the level of insight she has, that she does not feel comfortable making those decisions independently, despite her age or her career or her reputation.
It seems like this could happen to anybody. You hear about, lottery winners having syndrome and stuff like that, where it's like, oh, like, the world is broken down when you have those kinds of decisions that you have to make. In your professional experience, have you found, particularly one that's, rooted in media and performing, have you found that it takes a particular toll on those who've been introduced at such a younger age? I mean, I didn't realize Britney Spears is 39. She's my age. Like Britney Spears born the same time, same place. And it seems like in spite of her having so much worldwide success, she has a bunch of issues that, 39-year-old Britney Spears has a bunch of issues that 39-year-old Quasi doesn't have. Like, and maybe it's because fame and fortune wasn't bestowed upon me as like a child, and I wasn't, my childhood wasn't depicted on camera. Is this, hey, this can happen to anybody, which I guess we kind of sort of know it could, or is it acute and special because, hey, my life is, her life in particular is kind of sort of been on camera for all of us, from the Mickey Mouse Club all the way up?
Yeah, it seems prevalent.
It's not unique to. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just mentioning it seems prevalent in child stars. I mean, most of the time they had difficulty making that transition into an adult career, but she didn't. She had, the opposite. It was like superstardom, but it still ended up, not being beneficial for her. So that was interesting. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's all I had to say.
No, yeah, I don't think it's unique to fame and fortune. I would agree with you. It can happen to anyone. Look, the human psyche is fragile. Anyone, any day can begin to experience symptoms that changes their life forever. Like, that's just how fragile we are as humans. However, as we were talking about previously, is stressors that are on people. How adept is this person able to cope with the amount of stressors they have? And if they don't have the necessary tools to do so, they're more inclined to experience mental health issues. How do people get to a place that they don't have the tools? Again, minimizing issues, denying issues even exist, ignoring that the issues are there, ignoring when people feel stressed or overwhelmed to the point of emotionally, quote unquote, breaking, and being asked to keep performing, keep going with the flow. Don't stop. Don't do those check-ins. Just keep going. I think you mentioned the word machine, and that's the idea. Humans are not that. We can't just, we can just keep going, but there are going to be huge consequences to that. And the emotional consequences that come with that will become more and more severe.
I guess there was immense pressure on her because, I guess her whole business operated like a machine. She's responsible for the livelihood of so many. They're not too concerned with, her mental health. And I'm sure that played a major role in it.
And then just how she was expected to fit into a mold of who a young girl should be, of who a woman should be, how she's dealing with double standards all the time when people are interviewing her. They showed her Star Search performance. And I don't know if I think it was before the performance, Ed McMahon asked her, not the little boy next to her, asked her, do you have a boyfriend? And she's like 10. And she just weird. And she just looked at him like, no, because they're mean. And he was like, well, I'm a boy. And she's like, I guess sometimes things are different, but just from that age, asking her about having a boyfriend, and then how, it's like she never really owned herself. It's like the world was pretty much, okay, you're Britney Spears, this is who we want you to be. You're not fitting into that. And then, the issues with her relationships and how she's painted as this monster, this terrible woman. And, you know, Justin Timberlake and Kevin Federline just kind of skate by. And I mean, dealing with misogyny and all that stuff placed upon her, and she's never spoken out on it. I can imagine that would really take a toll on a person. So what do you think about the misogyny aspect of her career? You know, I'm sure when it comes to men and women, there are different challenges within each group. But I mean, how would you, as a professional, address that? Like maybe a woman who's dealing with a lot of misogyny and, you know, can't get away with it, get away from it, because we do live in a misogynistic society. I think we all have some of it in us, men, women, whatever, because it's just a part of the world. How would someone in that position even go about handling that?
Yeah, I think have brought up so many things I want to comment on actually. Her being, let's say, 10 and saying, you know, ill boys are mean is just so appropriate for a 10-year-old to say, right? And even so, then there was further questioning regarding maybe something would have been wrong with her, let's say, because she didn't have a boyfriend. But you know, she's 10 years old. I don't know how much of that would have registered to a 10-year-old that this is an interesting line of questioning that's happening to me. But once someone gets older, hopefully they do become more in tune that this sort of questioning, misogynistic ways of being spoken to is depending on that person, may say this is inappropriate. And one of the ideas that you also highlighted is that you feel like she was placed in a box and said, this is who Britney Spears is going to be. And it doesn't sound like she had much room to really get to know who she was. What are her standards? More importantly, what are her boundaries? And so when someone's speaking to you in an interview or otherwise, is that if something is misogynistic that makes you feel uncomfortable, that you don't want to answer, is that her feeling confident in herself enough to not move forward with the questioning? Where was the boundaries that she was able to place down for herself? And that's the way that I would speak to someone who would come to me and say, I'm in an environment where it's a lot of misogyny. The question is do you want to continue to be in that environment? If you do, we'll work on that. If you don't, let's work on getting you out. But if they say I want to continue in that environment for whatever gains that they're getting, that's fine. How are you going to be able to be in this environment and feel like you have autonomy and you have a voice and that you can take care of yourself so that you can protect yourself and feel safe despite other people's verbiage to you? And really, now we need to understand, where are your boundaries? Where are your limits? And when someone attempts to cross those boundaries of what you feel like is too much, then what sort of action will take place that you feel comfortable enacting?
So you mentioned boundaries.
So prevalent, and it's like just dumped upon you every day, all day. They're just expected to grin and bear it, especially.
Right. I mean, celebrities are not treated like they're human beings who have feelings. It's just kind of like, well, you signed up for this. Deal with it.
Pretty much.
And keep smiling, and if you're
like, you get all this money, like, this is what it is.
Yeah, like, why are you upset? You're rich. Go be rich. It's like, it's not. It doesn't work that way.
We all define ourselves in that fashion anyway, though.
Pardon?
Don't we all define ourselves in that fashion anyway? Most people that I know define themselves by whatever career choice they made, you know, and they carry themselves in that regular deportment, you know. And me, my chosen line of work is I'm a fitness person, right? I find myself in the gym every single day. Walter, why are you eating a candy bar? Let's go have ice cream cake. No, I can't. It's not what I do, you know. But did I always like ice cream cake? Of course I did, right? But I just stopped doing it because it's, you know, the direction that I want for me. So don't we all in some way, shape, or form comport ourselves to whatever profession it is that we hope to be in or that we are in, right?
Yeah, but yours isn't as toxic as Hollywood. You know what I mean? It's like
being abused by the paparazzi.
What's the difference?
You're abused by what?
We're abused by police, by society, by all the things around us. Why is that any different?
Does that make it okay?
I'm not saying it's okay. I'm saying that the stressors, while like Dr. Marshall-Woods said earlier, the stressors are all there. They're just different. It's a different type of stressor. It's I may not be worth $250 million, right? But I have a community of friends that are around me that look up to me in a certain aspect, in a certain way. And they expect certain things from me, whether I want to be that person they expect it from or not. So in some way, shape, or form, don't we all have that type of box that we have to live in?
Not necessarily. I mean, personally, I don't think we have to live in a particular box. And if the people who are your friends and who genuinely love you and support you aren't going to put you in that box. They're not going to question the things you do. They're just going to let you be you, because hopefully when we have people in our lives, it's because we want them there. Not because of what they do or what they can offer, but hey, I care about you. Like, for example, I have a very close friend, best friend I met when I was like 5 years old. She's a singer, she's a songwriter. She's, exposed to a lot of things that I couldn't imagine, lots of criticism. She's had to make a lot of adjustments in her life to be able to deal with that stuff. But at the end of the day, like, I don't look at her and think, well, you're a singer. This is just what it is. I just look at her like, hey, girl, if you want to quit, I get it. Quit. I'm here. I'm always going to be your friend. That's just, it is what it is. Like, I think the whole idea of boxes, just for me personally, I think it is kind of a toxic thing, because it doesn't allow a person to be fully human and have that full human experience. I don't know, Dr. Marshall-Woods, what do you think?
I'm thinking a lot of different things. Walter, you mentioned, doesn't this happen for everyone? And I'm thinking, this is why I feel like this is not just about someone who's got fame and fortune. It can be for anyone who chooses a career that then moves their career in that way, where they're like, this is how I want to present myself, and I'm not going to sway from that in order to reap the gains of what I'm investing in.
Right.
However, I also think, one, there's a conscious choice to do that. Like, you can say at any given time, you're going to eat an ice cream sandwich.
Right.
You can figure out how you're going to navigate the rest of your week to be able to accommodate that sandwich. Or you may say, you know what, even though I'm a physical fitness individual, I am going to decide for a month to take a break. And you have that autonomy to do so. And you have all of the reasons why you feel like that's in your best, hopefully, mental health to do so. And then you say, okay, and after that month, I'm going to resume what I want to do. I think that when we are put into boxes, yes, it can be very limited. It can be actually constraining and toxic for people, especially if they don't understand the box they're getting into. Mm-hmm. But hopefully, if you have a career, especially one that you feel is authentic to who you are as a person, the box you're getting into should feel pretty comfortable.
Right.
Right. But taking it back to the example of Britney Spears.
Yeah, but she, as a child, she was
her box. She was a child, and this is the only life she knows. And then, when people are making decisions for you and they're people that you trust, like, no one would ever want to think that their father is going to take advantage of them and manipulate their situation and rely on them financially. But, I think something like that, where a child can't really know what they're signing up for. And then once you're in it, you become an adult. Well, at this point, this is all you know. This is the only way you know how to make money. So it's like, now you just kind of have to deal with it, because you have so many people relying on you. Like, to your point, Walter, it makes perfect sense that, yeah, you work in fitness, but you probably made that choice after childhood, unless, you know, you were a kid and would like watch certain things and be like, that's what I want to do when I grow up. But you still had the opportunity to make an informed decision. No one thrust you into it and was like, little Wally, you're going to work out and this is going to be your life. You the whole family. You know what I mean? Like, so.
There is no Wallies here. Let's take that, tie it in the box.
That's going to bother you. That's why I did it. So we'll say Walter.
Concrete cinder block, throw that into the Chesapeake and let it sink to the bottom. That's where Wallies go. That don't exist.
So my apologies. So no one came to you and said, Walter.
There you go.
Work out. Okay. I can see it in you. Let's go. I mean, and that happens to children who are athletes and they have promise.
It does, for sure. I can tell you.
On it. You know what I mean? But yeah, so.
Autumn, I think you're highlighting you said a word that I think is really important. People are dependent on them. The child is the dependent. Adults being a dependent to a child is problematic in just adult-child relationships.
Yeah.
Right? So that's where I think where the toxicity comes from, is because that relationship is unnatural, that an adult would be dependent on a child. Given the fact that they do not have the wherewithal, they certainly don't have executive functioning skills that is developed enough to be able to make in-tune decisions about what is happening in their lives. So for an adult who should actually have a solid way of making decisions is dependent on a child that is legally a dependent as well, that's where the issues become, is that this is now what we would consider an unnatural relationship. And so there are many child stars who do quite well, and they decide they want to keep acting or doing whatever they're doing or performing in some way. And then you have child stars who you're like, whatever happened to them? And they're like off being a physicist or doing something else. Like they chose something that's totally unrelated to Hollywood in order to be able to actualize who they want to be. And they're doing that instead. And then they may come back later on in their career. You're like, they've been gone for 20 years. Maybe then they realize, oh, I want to do that again. Or let's say you have, a Fred Savage, who used to be an actor, and he now does a lot of directing instead. You never really see him anymore on camera. People find their way.
The actress that played Blossom, I remember when she was a kid, she said she wanted to be a marine biologist. And then she became a marine biologist. And now she's back to acting again.
That's right. That's right. People should be offered the opportunity, and I will say is a privilege to be able to find your way in life. Especially if you do have the financial resources, now you have that privilege. You should be offered the same privilege by these loved ones, the supportive people in your life, to say, is this really what you want to be doing now? And that should be a question that is asked periodically, not every 5 years, not every 10 years, maybe every 6 months. Is this something that's still making you happy? Do you still want to do this? Do you still want to commit? Do you want to do other things? Do you want to broaden your scope? So this is not the only thing you've been exposed to that could make you money or make you happy. Do you want to try playing tennis instead? Do you want to try doing golf for a couple months? What is it that you want to engage in, so then you have other opportunities and exposures? So this is not the only thing you're relying upon. So now you feel like you're in a tunnel, that this is the only thing I can do. And if I don't do this, my parents or loved ones have other resources where they can actually be adults and take care of themselves, because this is a child.
We are at 10:25 right now. So it's about an hour and 10 minutes. Really, your section has been about an hour. Do we want to, this conversation is fascinating. I can easily continue. But
if anyone else, we don't want to take up.
Yeah, Dr. Woods, we were asking about your time. If you have.
So it's totally up to you if you want to conclude here, or if you're open to more questions that anyone else might have. If no one has any questions, then we can give you.
Of course, I'm open to anyone asking more questions. That's fine. I don't want to just say no. I would love to hear if Wally has questions.
No.
Hold on, excuse me. This is still recording. This needs to be deleted. This needs to be deleted quickly, sir.
We're gonna keep the Wallies for sure.
Yeah.
And you need to support about that.
If you want to.
Yeah, I mean, it's complete. I've really been enjoying this. I'm actually just listening to you guys. To be honest, I'm actually putting together the post for the podcast while you guys are talking, just looking at that's where it's been. What classes are you still teaching at GW, Dr. Woods?
I do.
What undergrad, grad, both?
No, just graduate studies.
Just graduate studies.
Mm-hmm.
How do you balance the teaching and the consulting and the practice? How's your internal psyche going? That's a lot you got going on.
Yeah. Luckily, I belong to a department that is very supportive. They actually encourage us to have time to be able to do the things we love. So that's one of the reasons why I actually took the job, is because they knew already the things that I were involved in, and they were supportive of that. Actually, as a result, I have a film series at GW in collaboration with the Washington-Baltimore Center for Psychoanalysis, where we watch films together and talk about the psychoanalytic dynamics found within the films. And that's something that GW hosts on my behalf. They are extremely supportive. When I go to film festivals, I mean, they are like, great, this is exciting. So for me, it's a wonderful balance. There I teach psychological assessments, so how to do those psyche vals that I was referring to that are court ordered many times, and then other people get them just because they're interested in knowing a little more about who they are. And I also teach trauma. Different various types of trauma, specifically like natural disasters, cultural trauma, interpersonal trauma, chronic trauma, intergenerational trauma, etc. I also supervise the students too for their psychological testing and their therapy services. But they provide time for me to be able to do these other aspects of my career. Our therapeutic, most of us have private practices on faculty. And so they offer time for you to have private practice as well, to be able to continue to enhance your own professional competency, so that when you're teaching, you are basically teaching what you do every day. So for me, it's been wonderful.
Yeah, my brother he got his PhD from GW. He was in the counseling center for a while. He absolutely loved the experience there. He's teaching at Loyola now, but yeah, it seems like you could only make it work if you had a supportive, kind of university structure where it's like, please do you, like whatever it is that you're doing, you benefit us, so you can make it happen. But yeah, you're doing a lot.
I account GW to that encouraged me to do psych and film. One of my mentors there said to me one day, Kat, they all call me Kat, Kat, what do you really want to do? If you could do anything, what would you want to do? And I said, I'd like to write about psychology and film. And they put me in contact with APA, and I started writing for the American Psychological Association. And then it took off from there. After that, I wrote a book and then started working with filmmakers. I actually account that despite I wanted to do that, I didn't know how to get into doing that. But me being connected with GW actually was the catalyst of making all of this happen for me.
What's the book called, if anyone is interested in reading and purchasing?
Sure, it's called Best Psychology in Film. And there I look at different Academy Award-winning films of a specific year, in particular the year in which they indicated that there were more diverse films that were being recognized. And I take those films and look at both the global film as well as the individuals who were nominated for Best Supporting and Best Actor and Actresses, and looked at their roles and what was the psychology within their roles and what made them actually so unique and actually prestigious enough to be nominated for an Oscar. which hopefully helps screenwriters be able to say, if I want to write something that's at that caliber, this is the nuances I need to be able to think about to put into my scripts.
It really goes back to what you were saying about the power of film as a medium. We got to have you back on, first of all, because this actually got started 7 years ago. I did a NCAA tournament style bracket of the top 64 movies of all time and then the top 64 actors and actresses of all time. And it just went from, me on Facebook, doing Facebook stuff to people like, what else are you guys going to talk about? And then all of a sudden we had a company and a forum. So we definitely have to have you back on for that, for sure. But Autumn was right in the sense that we make sure people got the book. Can you talk about Thrive Global, the medium, a little bit?
Yeah, so
A Healthy Mind also.
Yeah, so Thrive Global and Medium, I generally blog for them. Medium is more of a site where I actually express blogs that are about psychology and film, similar to what I offer at Thrive Global. But individuals who don't have access to a healthy mind, which is a DC local television show that features other experts about all sorts of different careers and how those careers are linked to being healthier mentally. Like, for an example, I'll have a financial advisor on and he's talking about, or she's talking about their career and what they do and how we link finances to how that makes for a healthier emotional stability for people. People who don't have access to that television show actually is transcribed and we place it on Medium for individuals, and then we allow them to have access to the television show via YouTube. So that's a way for people to get connected to other mental health resources who are not in the DC area. Thrive Global has the venture of healthy body, mind, and soul. And so most of my writing about psychology and film is placed on Thrive Global as well.
I'm when you say Medium, you're talking about medium.com, right?
Yes.
Got you. Okay. Got you. I'm linking to one of your Medium articles now in your bio. We got the book. We got Healthy Mind, UDC. We got Thrive Global. We got GW. We got your the incredible niche market that you have. It reminds me of and you got a background in performing too, right?
I do.
So I can definitely see it. It reminds me so much of R. Lee Ermey and what's the Kubrick war movie? Oh my God! Wow. Full Metal Jacket. Yeah, he's originally a consultant, right? He's like originally a consultant. When you were saying that, like it was a fast. He's originally a consultant. They're like, no, a drill instructor wouldn't do this. He'd do that, and then like you go on Kubrick's side. Maybe you should just play this role. And he does, and of course he kills the movie. You just tell by you got like a soothing, maybe it's a psychologist thing, like, because my brother's the same way. Yeah, it's just soothing, like kind of sort of, oh man, like she could be on camera or like over audio or whatever. It's pretty absurd. This has been great. I'm not trying to cut anybody off or anything like that. I'm ready for this. I'm ready to post this. We've actually got 5 podcasts in reserve. This is the one that I'm going to have to edit the least. I basically have to edit myself out, me talking all over it. That's why I got to edit out. Does anybody have anything else? And I'll even stop the recording if we want to continue the conversation.
Thank you, Doctor. Appreciate your insight.
Yeah, thank you so much. We really appreciate you.
No.
Coming on and talking with us.
Yeah, so
I learned a lot.
I got a few therapy session scenes in the next film, though. Yeah, hopefully.
You do. Those are usually the ones where people are like, what should that office look like? And how should this person sit? And should I have a mug here? And should the visual of the mug look like this? Like, it's a lot. That's a lot of set accuracy work that goes into those scenes.
That's great. All right.
Yeah, so thank you so much.
Yes, Dr. Marshall-Woods, really, 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 super, really appreciate it. The this particular pod has an air of gravitas, as particularly when it comes to clinical terms and what mental health actually is. I think it's really going to be beneficial for our audience, which I guess I'm happy to report is burgeoning. Like I said, I've got a bunch of podcasts in reserve. We have one out there, and people are like, when are the next ones coming? And I'm like, I'm not a producer. I'm trying to like do fine production things. Just put it out there. I'm like, all right. So I definitely can do that with this one for sure. And please promise that you'll give us access when we do the movie actor actress bracket, because I'm going to redo it also. It's been 8 years since I did the last one, so we've had 8 years of movies since then.
Oh yes, of course. So again, this is what I love, so it's fine. It'd be great.
All right, I'm going to stop recording. There that